Welcome to the Alignment Show, featuring conversations with folks who have taken steps to identify their highest values and align their lives around them. Time on this earth is not unlimited, and you may be seeking to make sure you spend your time on things that matter to you. These conversations will encourage you and support you in doing so. Now, let's meet this week's guest on the Alignment Show. And good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Cut off the intro music there, sounded like. Oh, it's one of those mornings. You ever have one like that? Sometimes just, I'll mention just kind of on a personal note, this was one of those days I was up all night last night taking care of my disabled daughter. And honestly, I almost forgot that we had this scheduled at 11 a.m. today. So I'm glad that I remembered, because we have a really good conversation here with Todd Payne. I'll be introducing him coming up here in just a moment. A little reminder about our sponsors. The SalesWise Live event is actually going to be starting April 1st, I think it is, April 2nd. You can find out more about it at donnking.com/saleswise. That's DONNKING.com/saleswise. But honestly, it is too late to register, I think, for the April 1st thing. What you want to keep track of that link for is because Bob and Jeff and sorry, I'm drawing a blank on her name. Oh my goodness, just go take a look at the site there. They are going to be doing this every quarter. At least that's the plan. And if you're just now joining us, you don't know what SalesWise Live is, you think, oh, well, that's just about manipulative stuff about how to back people into a corner. It is the opposite of that. In fact, you don't have to be in professional sales to benefit from it. Nonprofits will benefit from it. Ministry folks will benefit from it, because their whole approach is about building genuine connections with people. You know, the root word for the word sales, I've always heard, comes from a Northern European word that literally means to serve. That's the basic idea behind how they approach things. And so check out donnking.com/saleswise to find out more about that. Also, my own books. This is one of the sponsors of the programs. I have a couple of books out already that are in the Sparklight Chronicles series, a series of books designed to help support you in living your values so you can value your life. That, after all, is the theme of the Alignment Show here. And these books do this in the form of what we would call business parables. That is, we use a good story, and I have been told by readers that it is an engaging story, good stories to teach nonfiction principles for life. And so we've got two more in that series that are in progress right now. So we would invite you to go there and check out donnking.com/books to find out more. I will have in the show notes, I'll have those links. I haven't tried to get them up here on our screen right now, although they will show in the crawl down here during our broadcast. But right now, I just want to go ahead and bring our guest on, Todd Payne, whom I was pleased to get to know a little bit through this interview. He is the founder of a site that we'll reference. It's called Konnectfully, but Connect is spelled with a K. And again, we'll be linking to that. But Todd has over 2 decades of experience in counseling, coaching, and psychology. He's particularly devoted to helping couples navigate the challenges of their relationships. And, you know, anytime that you're dealing with humans, and we hope, yeah, I know we're in the age of AI, but, you know, we're still in human to human connection. Hope we stay that way. He is seeking to help couples navigate the challenges of their relationships and to find lasting fulfillment. We're going to find out what led him to that, what got him started with it, his origin story a little bit. If you have anything to do with other human beings, you are going to benefit from the conversation with our guest today. So let me do a little bit of lining up here. Run into slight tech issues, but we'll get this going here soon. Let's see. There is, as our friend David Newman sometimes says, this is like running a starship. But I believe, yeah, there we go. There may be a slight pause as we get started here, but we'll see how this goes technically. And I would urge you to take notes, engage in this conversation. So let's bring on Todd Payne. Come on, Todd. And thank you, Donn, for that introduction. We are going to get right into our interview with Todd Payne. I told you in the introduction, I would assume that I did my job. A little bit about Todd's background. And so I know that, well, a little bit that I know about you, Todd, because we are just getting to know each other. Longtime listeners here know that I still serve as a pastor in United Methodist Church. I think you came out of ministry. And just before we started recording, I said something about origin story. And you said, "Oh, I've got an origin story." So I think we're just going to leave that wide open and tell us, how did you get started doing what you do?
Well, thank you. And let me begin just by saying thank you for the work that you do and for having me to be a part of this tremendous effort and energy. And it's really fantastic to be here today. Yeah, I do have a kind of a crazy origin story. It starts back in college because I was actually not raised in any religious tradition, but I had a religious experience in a church. I followed a girl I was dating to church one day, you know, because we'll follow girls anywhere. Oh, yeah. And she took me to church, and I had a religious experience. I was baptized about a year later and ended up in seminary to become a minister about 2 years after that. So it was a wild time for me. But when I told my folks that I wanted to be a minister, my father said, and I quote, "You can't be a minister. You're terrible with people." And then, as part of my training, I had a year-long internship with a supervisor who gave me the following evaluation at the end of the year-long internship. He said, "Todd has none of the gifts and skills essential for ministry." So I was starting out with an arm tied behind my back. Through a series of events, I ended up becoming ordained a couple of years later. I was actually, the body that oversees ordination said, "No, Todd, you cannot become a minister." But then there was some sort of back channel dealing, and I did become ordained, but I wasn't very good at it. My father was right. And ministry is a people job. It's a people industry, and it took me many years to sort of have the rough edges worn smooth. Now I'm an emotional intelligence coach, and I work with individuals and couples. But really, what I like to say is, if you are failing math, don't go to the kid who aced the class without doing the homework. Go to the kid who failed last year and is passing this year, because he's the one who can show you how to solve the problems in a way that you'll understand. That's me with people. It took me 10 years, it took me 15 years to really understand how people work, how to lead them, how to connect them to one another, and then I got a sabbatical about 15 years into my ministry. And my bishop said to me, I was in the Lutheran church, by the way. My bishop says to me, "What are you going to be doing for study during your sabbatical, right? This isn't a 3-month vacation." And I said, well, I really didn't know. And so he pointed me toward the Enneagram. And I got an Enneagram coach and some Enneagram books and discovered a system of understanding people that put this 15 years of being tumbled in the rock tumbler of ministry into a perspective, into a system that I could understand and apply. So I came back from my internship, or my sabbatical rather, and started using it with my staff, started using it with my volunteers, started using it with my councils and my boards, and found it to be this powerful tool. So at the end of 20 years of ordained ministry, I got burnout on weekends and evenings, and I decided it was time for me to try something different. But the Enneagram had been such a powerful tool in those past years that I decided that was really what I felt I could continue to answer my call to serve and to use my gifts to improve the world, but able to do it in a way that was quite practical and really independent of the church in any way. So that's sort of how I ended up doing what I'm doing. It's in a nutshell.
Okay, very good. This leads to 3 questions that I have, and I'm going to try to be organized and not forget any.
Okay.
But the first one is just a really quick one and a leading question, because I've had some other former pastors, who are doing something else now. So here's the leading question. In your mind, is this still a form of ministry?
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
there's no wrong answer there, but yeah.
Right. No, I understand. I might prefer a word like vocation or calling, because ministry, I think, has sort of church attached to it. But I certainly think that I continue to strive to be what I can be in the world in a way that improves it, in a way that I'm using what I've been given to make a difference. So in that way, I feel like it's absolutely my vocation to bring this to people in ways that they can have better marriages and be happier with their grown children, and try to talk to people and figure out this crazy thing called being in relationship with other human beings.
Yeah, it's a genuine service here. Related question, in a lot of traditions, I know in going through what I have done for the Methodist Church, I'm not familiar with the process in the Lutheran Church, but there's a fairly long drawn out idea of what would we call it, verifying your calling.
Yes,
and
that's
it sounds
correct.
like there was something like that for you in the early things. They were saying no.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's several stages where they sort of let me pass through. They're like, well, let's see how this will go. But at the very final stage, they walked the walk with me for 5 years, maybe 6 years before I graduated from seminary. But in that final semester of seminary is the final determination. And that's when they said no. And at that point, I had invested 5 years of my life in heaps of student loan debt. I didn't have other skills. I didn't have other direction to go in. So I was quite angry for a long time, and I would have nothing to do with the church. However, I met my wife in seminary. She's also an ordained Lutheran minister. And so she went on to be ordained and serve in the church. And so I was still connected in that way. And that's how I ended up through some back channels being back in the thick of things.
Yes. It strikes me twofold. God moves in mysterious ways, number one. And number two, it does stand in contrast to some Christian traditions where, you decide the day you're going to be a minister, tomorrow you can get a church. There's lots of different ways of doing that sort of thing.
Sure. Well, and to your point, I also like to say God tends to get done what God wants to get done, despite us. Sometimes the institutions and all of the committee meetings and the stuff, it can kind of get in the way at times. So I'm glad that wasn't enough to stop the process.
Indeed. And it's the will is still being carried out, maybe just in a different way than what we had planned. So there
adjusting.
we go. Getting away from the theology a little bit, though, I was also responding to what you were saying about the kid who failed it last year and has figured it out. I relate to that as without going into me and my stuff here a whole lot. I have a degree in communication studies, and I've noticed that my psychology friends, my communication studies friends, we seem to have this similar background, that I was very awkward growing up, and you take a course in it to try to get better. It doesn't work. You take another course, and eventually they say, oh, you got a degree in this now. And it reminds me, there was a book back in the 60s and 70s called The Magic of Thinking Big. And David Schwartz, I believe, was the author. he had a story in there, which I've since verified through other historical sources, about a man who suffered from polio, was in an iron
Hmm.
lung, and this was in the
Hmm.
50s. So,
Yeah.
well before the Americans with Disabilities Act. Um, he decided he wanted to go to law school, and there wasn't the kind of support for that sort of thing that we might have today. So, in order to get out of that iron lung, he taught himself a technique called frog breathing, where he's using his mouth muscles to force air into his lungs, sort of like
Okay.
that, and then
Mm.
to exhale, just relax. Um, so, every breath he took was a matter of conscious effort. If he fell asleep while he
Wow.
was out of the lung, he would have died. And
Oh
he
my
got a
gosh.
law degree that way. Now, where I'm relating to what you and I are talking about right now is, especially when we're talking about emotional intelligence, which is your specialty, I kind of feel that way about emotional literacy, let's call it,
Mm.
myself. That I'm
Okay.
really good at dealing with people now, but it's because it does not come naturally to me. And it kind of
Yes.
sounds that way to you. Now,
Yeah.
a related question here. I describe myself as a social introvert. And again,
Okay.
longtime listeners here know introversion. We're not talking about shyness. It's
Right.
where do you get your energy and how do you form your thoughts? Okay, so
Yes.
I enjoy a party as much as anybody, but I need significant downtime afterwards. And it's because every social aspect is a matter of conscious effort for me, the kind of thing that I perceive other people as doing without thinking much about it, the way that you breathe.
Right.
Does that make sense to you? I see you
Makes
nodding.
very good sense.
How
Yeah,
much,
absolutely.
how does that come into what you're doing with people now in helping folks who have a certain level of emotional intelligence on an unconscious level? What is it that you're doing to help them make it conscious? The learning curve where you go from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence to
To
conscious
conscious
competence,
competence,
which is still
to
awkward before
right, to
finally getting to,
unconscious competence.
there
Right.
we go. Yeah. So how do you work with people on
Well, that's a great question. And, one challenge that I face when I work with couples is that they don't always enter at the same place in terms of their emotional intelligence or intuition or how much of it is like breathing for them. So one of the first things that I try to do is create some common language. And that's one of the places the Enneagram becomes so helpful because we're learning a new system. It's not difficult, but it gives us a kind of, I had a student who was a psychiatrist for 30, 35 years, and he learned the Enneagram from me. And he said, I wish they had taught us this as a therapeutic model in our medical school, because all of the work we did as psychiatrists was me and you, what they call I, thou. And so much in couples, when we have a fight, when we have a disagreement, when we're trying to make a decision, it's the I thou, and it's very difficult. It can be kind of a black white loggerhead situation. And so I try to establish this common language that we use the Enneagram, that creates a kind of a neutral third ground. And that's what this student of mine pointed out. He's like, it has this opportunity for us to just talk about the Enneagram. My wife happens to be a type 2 in the Enneagram. There are 9 types for those who are unfamiliar. I'm a type 5. But when we have conversations, we can talk about type 2s and type 5s instead of saying, I don't like when you. I can say, I remember learning that type 2s do this. Do you feel like that's something that might be going on? And then she can weigh in and tell me where she's coming from. And we're having a conversation about this sort of neutral third thing that really frees us up to be us versus the problem, instead of us, me versus you, or you versus me. So that's one of the first things that I do. And then of course, I have exercises, whether I'm working with an individual or with a couple, to increase facility, to slow down time, because often some of the stuff happens, emotions triggered quickly, and to gain skills, as you've just said, first by intentional practice, then by repetition and gaining levels of comfort. But I tend not to focus so much on whatever problem they come to me with, which I know can be very frustrating at times to couples. We're fighting about our daughter. We're fighting about whether to take a new job. because really I want to give you the tools to handle whatever the subject matter is. I want to teach you guys how to talk to one another, so that today you deal with your daughter, tomorrow you deal with a new job, next year you deal with whatever problem next year brings. Because if you have the tools to have these conversations, then the rest of it is just filling the container, and that's the container I want to give you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I'm curious. Again, a couple of questions trying to get out at the same time. Let's ask the context question first. There are things in what we might call pop psychology that the average person is aware of that actual psychological research does not really support. Like, for instance, the Myers-Briggs type indicator. It's useful maybe for everyday conversation, but it doesn't have a whole lot of respect among
clinical application. Yeah.
Right. So has there been that kind of research done with the Enneagram? Am I saying it right? Enneagram?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Has there been much research done about using it as a therapeutic tool?
Excuse me.
Yeah.
It is, no, I mean, for coughing, I'm just getting over cold. There is some research, but the Enneagram is pretty late to the scene, which is funny because it is about 2,500 years old at the youngest. So it is actually a sort of a wisdom that has been passed down, and it has gone through various mystical communities over time: the Christian community, the Sufism, and the Islamic tradition. But it really didn't come into Western culture until the second half of the 20th century. So it really hasn't been around in the research-oriented civilizations to have had that kind of scrutiny. So I wish I could say yes. I do know that it is being used in a lot of applications, so they are testing it more and more. I actually know there is a doctor, a neurosurgeon or not a neurosurgeon, but a brain doctor. I can't remember. I think it maybe, yeah. Anyhow, I don't recall his title precisely, but he's in Atlanta. His name is Jerome Lube, and he has proposed a model for understanding the brain structures, the way the brain assigns different tasks like empathy or logic to a map of the brain that actually resembles the Enneagram. So this is a field that we're getting into. But for me, I came to it through a religious tradition, and 2,500 years is a lot of proof is in the pudding. And then, of course, for me also, when I just use it, I discover how accurate and meaningful it is. I mean, it is just a framework for thinking. It's not it doesn't claim to be more than that, but
exactly. It may not even be insightful. Wouldn't even necessarily want to research it. In practical terms, it is useful.
That's for me. And again, I'm a coach, not a therapist. And that's one of the big distinctions. As a coach, I'm looking forward. So I'm asking what works. If we're going to look backward, we're going to only do it as much as we need to know where we are and what our options are moving forward. But forward movement is always the goal. And the Enneagram gives us that kind of traction to make sustainable change in yourself and in your relationship. And boy, if that's not worth, everything. So a lot of us find, I don't know if this is your experience, but a lot of us find we kind of try the same things over and over again and don't know what else to do. And so the Enneagram gives us some new options and some clear paths forward. It's not, it's very concrete in that way.
Exactly. I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. So somebody who is not all that familiar with the Enneagram, and I will tell you, I have some other friends who work with it. I've done it. I cannot remember what my numbers are, which tells you that I'm not wrestling with it a lot. If somebody is wanting to familiarize themselves a little more with that basic thing, do you have on your website some tools for that, or would you point them to some other resource to get familiar with it?
It can be overwhelming because, like any system, you can kind of glean the main points on an Instagram reel. But it also can be quite complicated and nuanced because human beings are not flat-faced creatures. We're nuanced, we're multifaceted. And the Enneagram accounts for that, but as you might imagine, that requires some guidance. So I actually usually invite people into a learning process. And I have a course that is part of my program. I do one-on-one and live stuff as part of my program. But I also find that you just need a guide to help you apply it. You otherwise you're just getting theory. So your question is a good one, and I wish I could say yes, this is the spot. If I named some book titles for you, I was intimidated by them. They're 500 pages. You know what I mean? So it's not really the best way in. The best way in is through yourself, to have a conversation. And I always want to have conversations with anybody who's interested, because I'm always learning and adding to my understanding of how this works too. Because together we can figure it out. Together I know the questions to ask. I know what to listen for. I know how to suggest and kind of give you enough to find a balance. But one thing I find really interesting about the Enneagram is because it doesn't characterize our behaviors, but really it gets at our motivations. And one of the ways it does that is it reveals the self-talk that we have. We're all having an inner dialogue in our minds all day long. But when you find your Enneagram type, I like to talk about it as an act of confession. If you take a test and the test says you're a type 4, well, you can read the type 4 profile and cherry pick it. That sounds like me, but this part doesn't sound like me. When you understand the system and you claim, you know what, I think I might be a type 4. It's an act of confession. You're claiming all of it, the best of it, the worst of it. You're kind of bringing it, putting yourself inside of it, and that's way more valuable. So having a conversation with somebody like me or another Enneagram person who knows their stuff is a much better way to find your way into this.
Again, that makes a lot of sense to me. I want to ask, related to that, as you say, there's a lot of books about it out there. There are Enneagram coaches. So I know some folks who are enthusiastic about Enneagram. Use it for themselves. They have not gone into an activity to where they're helping other people, certainly not doing it professionally. So along with your enthusiasm for the Enneagram, what led you to make that a primary part of what you do as a coach, as a business? Does that make sense?
It's a great question. And, I've sort of allowed the need that I've seen before me lead me. And I would say half of my clients are one-on-one for personal development, and about half are couples. And that's really been an organic growth over the last 8 years, according to the need that I see. And when I was a minister, I was applying the Enneagram to helping people get along and resolving. You've certainly found yourself at a late night council meeting where people are fighting over some issue that's dear and dear to their hearts. And if you can give them tools to resolve this, this was really a unique application of the Enneagram, because it is historically about personal development. And what I discovered is when I first show you, and you see you in the system and you go, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, this really knows me. Then when I show you your partner, you have the same credence. You're bought into it. You're like, okay, so this is really what's actually going on with my partner. And when I can show you their inner dialogue, how they talk to themselves, their motivations, their hopes, their fears, there is a natural, I've seen it time and time again. It's probably my favorite thing about working with people in the way that I do. There is this natural blooming of empathy. Oh, that's what my wife is dealing with. No wonder she always responds the way she does. It changes the heart. It moves the heart. In biblical terms, we might say it softens the heart. Such that we can enter into a space where we can create empathy, we can create compromise, we can create a way forward. Because there's this, I don't even know how else to describe it other than being, maybe you could call it a peek behind the curtain. We get to see what's going on inside our partners rather than just, what's the old saying? We're great judges of other people and great lawyers for ourselves. This helps us to really understand where the other person is coming from.
I love that idea of fostering empathy. It's not, we might say it's not excusing bad behavior, but just understanding.
Yeah.
You know, if I made the assumptions that you do, if I had the goals that you do, I'd probably do the same thing. You know,
that's just it. And I make a point to talk with my couples to say that being willing to affirm your partner's experience is not the same thing as condoning it or agreeing with it. It's just saying, I know you're a person and what you're going through is valid and real. And the Enneagram really helps us to do that. And when we can honor one another's feelings, honor one another's process, it just creates the possibility for harmony in ways that, 1,000 conversations never will.
And let's emphasize, as you have done, but I want to be sure that listeners get this. You're not just going to take a little wheel with 9 segments and, I fit here and you fit there. And so there's this almost mechanical roadmap, because you're a 2 and I'm an 8, then I need to say X, Y, Z. And it's not that mechanical. That's where your experience comes into play. That's where a coach's experience comes into play. If nothing else, an outside observer to be able to be helpful in this situation.
Well, that's been one of the most challenging aspects of being in this business, is we live in a world that wants everything bite-sized and immediate application. And this is something that it takes an investment. It's a skill. Emotional intelligence is a skill. And I think as a young man, I was under the impression that because I didn't have any, that was that. It was like being short or something. It was like, I guess I'm short. But it's not. It can be taught. It requires, like any skill, first you have to be exposed to it, then you have to try it out, you have to practice it. It takes time. But a partner, when you're going through it together, when both people are learning it, and while you might have different levels of emotional intelligence, you're both new maybe at the Enneagram. That was really one of the opportunities for you guys to bond as a couple, as you go on this adventure together. You learn this stuff, you apply this stuff, you're trusting one another, creating vulnerable space. And that's, I see couple after couple after couple is transformed.
Yeah, you got that bridge that it can form. That makes a lot of sense. I wonder, you've probably already figured out, I think, in metaphors a lot. I'm hearing something here that makes me think of something else. If you've seen those videos that are not uncommon on YouTube of somebody who has been colorblind from birth. Yes. Somebody gives them a set of those glasses to where they can see.
I've seen those.
Okay. It's a very emotional experience.
Very moving. Yes.
So is that sort of what happens with the Enneagram? And,
that's the best metaphor I've heard yet, Don.
Do what?
Honestly, I said that's the best metaphor I've heard yet, and I'm, with your permission, I'm going to use it because
absolutely,
because that is how it feels to watch that happen. When I work with couples, I do joint sessions where it's the 3 of us, but I also do individual sessions because we're going to dive into you, we're going to dive into your partner. We got to be able to talk about things, and it's always in that session where you and I are talking about your partner that there's this moment, and putting the glasses on for a colorblind person, that is exactly what it's like sitting with them when they go. I mean, in this moment, I get in chills as I'm talking about it. But
I'm feeling it. I bet you can see it in their body language, and they're having that realization.
And there's almost like a thawing, because when we're with that same person for a long time, there's tremendous benefits to long-term relationships. But one of the things that happens is we forget some of the stuff we loved about the person. It's become routine, it's become mundane, and that's one of those moments where there's sort of this rediscovery, this spark. It's like, I do love that about her. It's part of the reason I married her is because she's different from me in this way. Now I hate it. I feel like I'm struggling against the way that she's different from me, but that's right, I do love that about her. That's one of the things that's so amazing about her. So it's a beautiful moment.
I'm feeling this from you as we're talking about it. I'm betting that this is what keeps you going, that it's not just business. You got to make a living at what you're doing. But I mean, this is Benjamin Franklin's thing about doing well by doing good.
Yes.
I can
It
only
does keep me
imagine.
going. Yeah, it does. And just walking the walk with people, you know, feeling like I had to walk it alone. My marriage got so much better when I discovered the Enneagram. So the first 15 or, almost, 12, 15 years of my marriage where I felt like I was walking alone. And like I said earlier, I think one of the most hopeless things is being like, well, I've tried everything I can think of.
Mhm.
But you don't know what you don't know. You can only think of what you can think of.
Mhm.
And so being the person who can bring this lantern to illuminate the darkness and walk with you and then send you on your way with the light in you, it's tremendously inspiring. It's absolutely what keeps me going.
I love to hear that. But before we show people your website, I want to be sure folks can get in touch with you. Those who are on with us on video, we've had the website address on the crawl down here. We're going to say it out loud for the people who are on with us audio only, and we will have those links in the show notes. So a little reminder, you can get the show notes by going to confidencecultivators.com, and you'll find show notes for all of our episodes. Before we go there, I want to probe something that may be related, may just be completely tangent here. But I'm fascinated by the fact that you live in Portugal now. You moved there some years ago from the
That's
United
correct.
States to begin with, I think.
That's correct. And I go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Just tell us about what led, because moving to another country is not like moving to the next town over. So
It's not at all.
yeah. And you've been there for quite some time now, I think. So, what led to that?
Sure,
And
sure.
what, how should we put this? There are a lot of people in this country right now who, for one reason or another, are considering going somewhere else in the world. And
Yes.
so, you did that years ago. So, just what thoughts might there be around that?
Sure. Well, we talked a little bit about my origin story. I certainly, I'm sure, as you do, as your listeners do, I have plenty more stories where that came from. Lived in my car for a year. But one of the most recent events that really led to Portugal was that my family and I lost our home in a wildfire in Colorado in 2021. We escaped only literally with the clothes on our backs. And it was a traumatic event. I wouldn't wish it on anybody, obviously. We walked around in a zombie-like fugue for 6 months. But afterwards, we came out and my wife and I, we looked at each other and we asked ourselves the question, what's the opportunity here? What might we be able to do? Like, when in the middle of your life do you have no possessions? And we had money in the bank from the insurance company. So we got all the kids together and we sat down as a family and we said, do we want to go back to where we were and try to rebuild what we had and spend our efforts and our energy, and in a couple of years we might be where we were before the fire? Or do we want to try something new? And everybody was game. And so we did some digging and some experimenting, and we landed on Portugal as a place that we could build a new life. The kids are now multilingual. My youngest, who's 14, goes to a Portuguese public school, and she's doing great. And we are just, all of us, learning so much about talk about empathy with your partner. We all graduate childhood thinking that people want what we want and feel the way we feel and think the way we think, but they don't. You know what, though? In a single culture, there's more similarity. Now we're in a whole nother culture, and it's like, oh my gosh, the world is such an amazing place. There's so many different ways of being a human being that are meaningful and productive. So it's been a joyful experience for us, and it really was born out of that tragedy. And again, I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but my brother put it best. He said, I've never seen anybody fall upward before, and that's really how we feel like we've done in our family.
Fascinating. And just because we don't know for sure when this episode will go out, we'll note that as we're recording this, we've just had the devastating fires in Los Angeles. And so
yes, which my whole family is in Los Angeles. Actually, I have family who's lost homes there. They're coming to us. You've been through this. What does this mean? What do we expect? Like, it's another chance for us to turn our scars into service. But our hearts, of course, are with all of those people, my in-laws and cousins and nephews and nieces and everybody.
Yes. Sorrowful for those folks. Glad you can be a resource for them. Sorry for the circumstances that led to you being a resource. Um, and we'll get theological for just a moment here. There's always those folks who will say, God didn't give you more than you can handle. That's not really biblical. We have
No,
more than we
but
can handle all the time. God gives us strength.
Mother Teresa's response to that was, I just wish you didn't trust me so much.
Exactly. Plus, I'm convinced that, there was a worldview at the time of Job that God caused everything, including the bad things that happened to us. I tend more to think along the lines that God is with us through whatever. And as Maya Angelou used to say, God doesn't waste pain. So
that's a beautiful expression.
We can make something good come out of it. So aside from that, I will also
That's the story of my life, Don. That's the story of my life. It's just every time there's some sort of a roadblock, the looking for a way and being willing to push through to say, okay, how do we turn this into a tool that we can use to serve?
Exactly.
That's just it.
And on an almost now trivial level, I will also say I've looked at several resources over the years, just out of curiosity mainly. That was if you're thinking about moving to another country, what are some good countries to move to? With the various reasons for that sort of
course,
thing.
yeah.
And Portugal comes up on just about every list like that. So there seems to be a fairly large expatriate community there.
There is, and we've met people from all over the world. We have dear friends from Brazil, from Turkey, from Australia. It's been a wonderful experience in that way too. And there's a real commonality among expats that we are all looking for community. We're all looking to make connections with people because we're all far away from home. And it's a wonderful, rich community to enter into. We're very, very blessed.
Very good. Very good. Well, before we forget, let's be sure we say the website and all that kind of thing out loud. And for those of you who are on with us visually, we're going to have a QR code to make it easy. But for the audio folks especially, Todd's website is, you can say it easily, Konnectfully.com, but connect is spelled with a K. Now, Todd, I've learned to be specific there because some people might think the K is that in the middle there, where that CT would normally be.
No, it's the start. That's right.
It's the start of it. KonnectFully.com. Konnectfully.com. And we're also putting up on the screen, on the crawl, the LinkedIn address so that you can see it. It's not just Todd Payne. It is Todd A. Payne. And Payne is spelled with a Y, Payne, because there's more than one way to spell that.
That's true.
And let's get those QR codes up there for the visual folks. So here is Todd's website where you can just point your phone at that. Even though we're on a computer screen, you can do that. And that will take you to his website. And if we move too fast, remember, you can always pause the video to be able to do that. And then here is a connection for Todd on LinkedIn. LinkedIn being, to me, I guess I'd say the least toxic social network.
Yeah. It's really professionally minded. We're not there to do anything silly or entertaining. We're just there to connect in a professional capacity. Yeah.
Exactly. And anything else that we come up with for resources, as I said, we will put in the show notes. So, Todd, as we're bringing our talk together to an end today, fascinating conversation. Thank you very much. I always like to wind up though by asking, is there something that you wish that I had asked? And in my rambling, we just didn't get around to. If so, what would that be and what would your answer be?
Boy, that's a great question. And it has been a joy talking with you. We could go on and on and on. I'll thank you again for having me as a guest. It's been a real pleasure. I guess maybe the question that remains is change possible? I think a lot of folks come to me and they've reached a place where they feel like it's what's left is put up with it the way that it is or give up on it completely. And my experience with myself and with my clients over time is that Hope is the most powerful tool that we've got. And the Enneagram, because it's so granular, because it's so rooted in our experience, because it's so helpful, it gives us hope. It says, listen, this is what's possible when we do the work. This is what you are like when you're at your best. This is what your partner is like when they're at their best. This is what the relationship is like when it's at its best. And most of us have had a small taste of ourselves, of our relationships in those best moments. And we recognize the description. And then we say, yeah, I would love that. And that's the starting place, hope. So I would love to say, is change possible would be the great question. And the answer is, yeah, it's absolutely possible. And hope is the fuel for that journey.
Mm-hmm. Hope keeps you going when it's not an easy, quick answer as well. Is that
Yes.
accurate?
Yes, that's definitely true. I like to think about a term, destination postcard. If you're flying to Hawaii for a long, lovely vacation, it's a cramped, painful flight in economy in the middle seat. But if you've got a book in front of you with pictures of the beaches you're going to and the different entertainment you're going to see and all the stuff, hikes you're going to go on, it's not so hard to sit through that flight. And that destination postcard, this is what it's going to be like when we get there, is so important.
Mm-hmm. Excellent advice. Excellent, what is that, mindset, I guess. This is not just a quick fix kind of thing. This is for a lifetime.
This is for a lifetime.
Wow. Well, Todd, thank you so much for being with us today. Listeners, I hope
pleasure.
you have learned something that will be useful to you. I want to encourage you to go check out Todd on LinkedIn and go to Konnectfully.com and take advantage of those resources. But we will look forward maybe to talking with you again, Todd. I would love to see. I'd love to hear some of those other stories.
Well, I'd love to share them. It's been a pleasure talking with you. I look forward to that next connection.
Very good. Well, I will turn it over to my live self now. Back to you, Donn. And thank you, Donn. That was such a great conversation with Todd. We could do a lot more, as you could tell, a lot more digging there. Honestly, digging into what makes humans tick, that's a lot of my own motivation. So I don't know if it's yours or not. I've got a post that I'm getting ready to put up on my newsletter, which, selfless plug here. You can go to, I can't even think of the link myself. I put it in the show notes. Okay. But I do have an ongoing support vehicle for people who are seeking to improve their ability to connect with people. And so I've got one that's going to be going out soon that is looking at the value of curiosity, just sheer curiosity. Yeah, I think it's natural to humans, and yet so many of us these days no longer have curiosity. If it doesn't have to do with getting a paycheck or putting food on our table or whatever, it's so easy to leave that behind. I'll share that with you in the show notes. Speaking of show notes, remember confidencecultivators.com. We've had it going on the crawl for a while, but we have a lot of listeners who are audio only. So you can always find show notes at confidencecultivators.com. I always emphasize that final S so that you know how to get to it. Show notes, further resources. We're going to be sharing stuff there. So make sure that you go there. Subscribe, upgrade for additional benefits, because there are things that we share with folks who upgrade. Share it with a friend, though. I mean, the basic material is always going to be free. You want to make a difference to people. You probably know somebody who could benefit from a conversation like this. Share it with that friend. You may know somebody, perhaps their marriage is having challenges, and it can be kind of hard to introduce that. But if they're talking about it, have you ever heard of the Enneagram or Enneagram? I'm never quite sure how to pronounce it. You can share this resource, share this episode. It's a non-threatening way to do that. So I work with a limited number of people to help them bring their book into publication. I'm working with about 4 people right now, and a couple of them will be cycling off soon. So if you are interested in exploring independent publishing, then reach out to me. I don't have a lot of availability, but I'm always willing to talk with folks. Finally, if you get value from the program, then we encourage you to subscribe. As we've already said, subscribe on whatever your favorite channel might be. And you can always go to buymeacoffee.com/Donn King, DONNKING. For that matter, you can find all kinds of material just by going to DonnKing.com, DONNKING.com. Coming up next week, I'm almost certain that we're going to have an encore episode from somebody who is one of our stars in alignment. This is a small group of people that, from my perspective, anytime they want to come on the program, I know they always have good stuff for you, the listener. Want to include you in the conversation. And so Kevin Tumlinson, who is going through some transitions of his own right now, is going to come back on the program. I think that's next week. And a lot of folks that listen, a lot of folks that watch with us here, you're going through your own transitions. You can learn from people like Kevin. After all, here on the Alignment Show, we are all about living your values to value your life. And when you're in the middle of a transition, it may be a little hard to think about your values. Well, that's a fancy way of just saying what's most important to you. And right now, you might be thinking it's most important that I get a paycheck. But for long term, everybody's got to earn a living somehow. If you can make that way of earning a living in alignment with your values, then you're going to be happier, less stressed, and set for the long term. So if you have an opportunity, I was so impressed with what Todd said about, not diminishing the impact of a tragedy, but to eventually be able to ask the question, what's the opportunity? This is not a Pollyanna thing, acting like that there's nothing wrong, it's all good, it's all positive. No, it's not. But you can look for the seed for what's next. What's the opportunity here? And so if we can help you to live your values and value your life, that's why we're here. And so we will look forward to seeing you next time right here on The Alignment Show. That's it for this week's episode of The Alignment Show. What has it inspired you to do in your own life? Whatever it is, take action now and take the first step. It will help you to talk with a friend about what you're thinking. Share confidencecultivators.com to spread the goodness. And remember to live your values and value your life. We will see you next week on The Alignment Show.